Well, thank you and welcome to the latest in the MillerKnoll Insight Group series online. I'm going to let our speakers introduce themselves and a little about what we do. I'll leave it over to them, but we will be using the chat box for questions, which they can keep an eye on as well. But if it needs me to fill them, I can come back at the end. But they're big guys who can look after themselves really well. So over to you guys. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you very much.
Sure. I'm happy to kick it off. Thank you, everyone, for joining. If I don't know you, my name is Ryan Anderson. I have the privilege of leading the Global Research and Insight Group at MillerKnoll. So we think about that in terms of both doing research globally, but also sharing. We share in a variety of touch points, with this webinar series being one of the key ones. But also we have a podcast and a newsletter, both called Looking Forward. You can find the podcast on Spotify, Apple, and online. And we get a chance to share insights in a variety of ways through our own channels, but also through many others. And I just got to tell you, as someone who gets a chance to hop on webinars several times a week, there are those times when you get on and you're a little bit nervous or a little bit tired, and I am fighting a cold, but in this case, it's one of those times where I'm just like, let's do this. I feel great about this, both because it's fun to see all of you and where you're from, but also because I get a chance to do this with two of my closest colleagues, Joseph and Mark. But probably more than anything with this particular one, it's the content. This body of content that we're going to share with you, to me, is really critical and key to helping organizations get unstuck from many of the short-term, often hybrid-related workplace challenges that they may have. It's based on a great deal of work that Joseph, who you'll meet momentarily, has led in partnership with others, and it's based on decades really worth of insight, looking at where the workplace has been and where it's going, and I think it's a path towards a better tomorrow. That's why we named it that. So super excited to do this together. Joseph, I'll let you introduce yourself and kick things off for us. And because I'm still sneezing a little bit, I might mute, but over to you, my friend.
Thanks, Ryan. And thank you everyone for joining us from all over the world. It's really exciting to have this moment to connect in this way. As Ryan was saying, I'm on the Research and Insight team as well. I'm Director of Design Strategy at MillerKnoll. And my area of focus is really on the expertise that Herman Miller, Knoll, and our broader collective of brands has developed over many years, looking at the relationship between people and the places that they create. So I come to this from a place design practitioner background, from the A&D industry, but I'm really working to lead this work forward for MillerKnoll going forward. As we all know, distributed working is something that existed before the pandemic. Wi-Fi, laptops, they freed people from desks a long time ago, but it took the global pandemic, this experience that we all, every single person on this call, had some sort of unique exposure to. It took that moment to push distributed work or flexible work to the level that we're seeing today. That is something that is known, and that's about where the knowns stop. We're looking at a very uncertain future ahead of us, very erratic change. And so for us, we took this as an opportunity to pause, to refocus on our values, and to look at what we have in front of us as a solid foundation that we can build upon as we look towards that uncertain future. So did some deep work looking at what we believe to be true about the relationship between people and place, to codify those into a set of principles, which we'll share a little bit later, and so that we can use those in relation to a constant stream of data that we're collecting around changing expectations within the world of work. So Ryan's going to share some recent data from one of our research partnerships on that. And then we'll also share some visuals of some new types of spaces that we're seeing organizations begin to test, to pilot, and use as a way to experiment and work through this uncertainty as they look to create a more long-term approach to workplace.
Hey, Joseph, I'm going to quick add 2 seconds. I'm so glad you brought up distributed working. If it's a new term to people, it really refers to that spreading out of work that happened after we got Wi-Fi and mobile technology. That was happening for years before the pandemic. Office occupancy rates were going down. Desk utilization was going down. The prevalent mindset was still to stuff more desks on a floor plan, which wasn't really a great sustainable long-term strategy. So in some ways, the pandemic accelerated what was probably a long overdue correction. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a good add. So really where we're at now at this moment is this realization that our relationships with work and workplace have changed forever. And I think that can be an easy statement to gloss over, but I really want to drill down on it and say there's a lot of dialogue about return to office. And I think when you frame conversations in that way, it sets a mindset that isn't actually very beneficial. So rather than returning to work the way that it was, let's start thinking about envisioning the way work can be going forward. While there were things that were good, there were many opportunity areas that we could challenge and push on to create better experiences for people going forward, regardless of where they're seeking out to get that work done. So one of the big changes that we've seen is working from home. This is something that we really don't see going anywhere. And there was a huge scramble early in the pandemic of people trying to make reconfigurations in their home to try to get a viable place to set up and work. And while some folks have been able to find some good productivity, some good focus at home, many can't, especially when we look across the globe and understand that many people live in multi-generational houses. They may have a very small residential place where they can't really get access to that type of space. So it's really important to be inclusive across your organization and create spaces for anyone, regardless of where they might be able to find that focus. In addition to that, where some people can focus at home, some can't, something else was really missing throughout that time. And it was really those broader social connections across the organization. Through some research that we've done, we've confirmed quarter over quarter that people feel a stronger connection to their immediate working team. So what sociologists refer to as strong ties. That's a great thing. But when you start looking at the strength of a culture across an organization, it's really weak ties that have the structural strength. So a weak tie being someone that you may only see every once in a while from a team that is not your immediate team, someone that's further functionally across the organization. So those connections are not happening as regularly through these remote and digital channels. And that's something where we're seeing some stretch. So bringing this collective energy back to the workplace to reestablish those weak ties is something that's really important for looking forward to longer term social health of organizations. This stat, people with low social connection are 70% more likely to feel burnout than people with high social connection. This is coming from an organization called BetterUp, which offers virtual coaching and mentorship. And this was shared with us by Dr. Kristen Leingruber, who's their head of behavioral research at the organization. And the fascinating thing here is that when you have that broad social connection, you've got that support network. In those moments when you feel like you're losing, you don't have control over your work situation or you're not sure where to go, if you don't have someone to reach out to, that ends up becoming an increasing cognitive burden that leads to burnout over time. But if you have strong social connections, both in the strong and weak sense, then this is much less likely to be an issue. So I'm going to pass over to Ryan to share a little bit about what we're learning through one of our other exciting research partnerships.
Yeah, I'm just going to add a little bit to what you just said. And I'll just say that one of the things that I think makes our research efforts really unique is that we do what we do in combination with dozens of brilliant collaborators around the world. If you'd like to know more about strong or weak ties, which I think are a really useful framework, you can learn about that from our friend Dr. Andreas Hofbauer on season 1 of our Looking Forward podcast. As Joseph mentioned, Christy from Better Up talks a little bit about social connections, and burnout and disconnectedness are really an issue. There was just a press release this morning from Gallup organization talking about the levels of engagement of U.S. workers being extremely low, including active disengagement, where you become so disengaged with your work that it affects the work of others. And in the press release, they comment that people almost feel like they're gig workers, which is a function of, in our knowledge of this, really, really poor connectivity between weak ties. So this is really timely. One of the other really important research collaborations we're a part of is called Future Forum. It's a collaboration between Slack, Boston Consulting Group, a group called MLT, who's focused on inclusive leadership, and MillerKnoll. We survey 10,000. We survey 10,000 people every quarter and do executive roundtables, and it's given us a great snapshot at the state of work right now. And as you saw from the deck, sometimes we'll use this deck in more of a one-on-one conversation to talk about what's happening at you or your organization. Open offer. If you want to have this conversation internally, we can do that. But let me just give you a sense of what we're seeing across the globe. This is from, again, those 10,000 people surveyed. This is from the results that posted October 22nd. The next results will come out mid-February. The heart of the matter for a lot of people really has to do with flexibility, and that's true of office workers. It's also true of what we might call deskless workers. But if we take a look at those who are traditionally considered office workers, we refer to them as desk-based workers. 80% want more flexibility with where they can work. That has certainly been the focus of a lot of hybrid conversation. Location flexibility, it is important. But often overlooked is something perhaps even more important, which is schedule flexibility. 94% of the employees surveyed want more flexibility in when they work. That can be working hours. It can also mean just control over your calendar. If you're someone that feels victim to your calendar, it seems like many organizations, when they went into quarantine, tried to replicate everything they did in the office via meetings. And if someone's got 6 or 7 hours of meetings on their calendar, it can just feel suffocating. It can impact a lot of parts of your work week in negative ways. For those that do have full schedule flexibility, meaning they have control over that calendar, when we ask them about their perceived levels of productivity, it's significantly higher, 29% higher than those that don't. Those with location flexibility rated their productivity around 4% higher. I'll say these are not objective metrics of productivity. This is a subjective perception of your own productivity. But in particular, to what Joseph talked about earlier from working from home, those that had schedule flexibility listed their ability to focus as 53% higher than those that couldn't shift their schedule. I totally get that. When you want to do focused, concentrative work, you really want to choose when you can do it. For me, I'm better off early to mid-morning. I'm not likely going to read an in-depth research report at 4 o'clock because I'm just fried at that point. And so schedule flexibility is really important. Let's keep going, Joseph. In terms of location flexibility and where people want to spend their time, there's a feeling, I think, if you hop on Twitter, not that I recommend that, or if you look at the articles being written, particularly out of media publications in New York and London, that, hey, life in the office is dead forever. I'm not sure the data indicates that. 15% of those surveyed on the right there say they want to be fully remote. They want to work from their home primarily. They might want to get together for quality time with the team. But there's actually a higher percentage, 20%, that say they want to be in the office full time. Could be the nature of their work, could be they have lousy Wi-Fi or a partner who's on Zoom calls all day or whatever. It could be any number of reasons, but there's people on both ends of that spectrum. 65% said they want some degree of a split or hybrid arrangement. I come from a product background in the early days of my career, and sometimes I'll think about it this way. If we were going to go create some sort of product, a coffee mug or a phone or whatever, and we were to survey 10,000 people and say, hey, would you like to use this? If 85%, 20 plus 65 said, yeah, I'd like to use that product every day or most days, we would be ecstatic. I don't really see from the data that there's a fundamental demand problem with offices, but if I keep using that product mentality, it may be that there's a value proposition problem with the office as a product. What is it doing? How is it delivering value? Do the customers, the employees, really see it as something of value? So let's focus then on what they want out of it. 74% list reasons relating to other people. Actually, more than that. 74% of people want to have camaraderie, community building, collaboration, in-person meetings. It's about quality focus, it's about quality social time. Likewise, let's add to it the 10% on the right that want quality time with management. That could be, people's career aspirations, but often people just feel a much greater sense of connectedness and belonging when you're close to management because you know what's going on in the organization. And then there's this 16% of people who primarily are going to the office to find quiet space to get work done. The data isn't in this deck, but we've had over 30,000 people globally use a tool from one of our brands, Herman Miller. It's a work from home tool, wfh.hermanmiller.com. In that tool, and the tool, by the way, is just to help people have a better work from home experience. But we asked people, what do they struggle with at home? Number one issue from the beginning of the tool when we launched it in July of 2020 to this day is focused productivity at home. It's just that sometimes distraction occurs. Earlier today, I was looking outside my window at some noise on the top of my house. I'm pretty sure it was a squirrel who, for whatever reason, was getting aggressive with our gutters. And I was like, I don't know what that is. So it could be any number of things. It could be something like a young child at home, or it could be leaf blowers, any number of things. But people need an assurance that when they go to the office, they can, on one end of kind of this bell curve, be very social and connected and have it really be about people. And on the other end of the bell curve, really find that focused, concentrative, heads down time. And, let's just be honest, a lot of floor plan designs of the past that focused on open benching, open desking probably didn't serve either very well. Not really designed for interpersonal connectivity, not really designed for heads down work. So might need to tune that a bit. All right, let's go on to the next slide. If that's why people want to be in the office, why are so many people not going into the office? Now, I was quoting data from Future Forum, which is that big 10,000 person quarterly sample. This is a smaller little study we did specifically in the US in September. We had that data from Future Forum. We had the data from the Herman Miller Work from Home tool. So we just asked 1,000 people, 889 responded. It mirrored the US Census. What are the factors impacting your decision to not work from the office on a given day? So in other words, if you can work flexibly and you think, well, I'm not going to go in today, why? Scale of 1 to 5, there was nothing that listed at 4.4. So there wasn't one thing. It was a series of things. The first, in first were 2 things that are tied. One being commute time and expenses. Wasn't particularly surprised by this, particularly given the excellent work that Leesman did a while back, correlating commute time with amount of time in the office. Commute's an important thing. It means that location strategy for those in facilities and corporate real estate roles is more important than ever. Tied for first, overall mental, physical, and emotional well-being. As Joseph points out, people are burned out. There was an excellent report from the U.S. Surgeon General last month describing the state of mental health among the U.S. workforce. It's not good. It cites a study indicating that right around 76% of people are showing a symptom of mental health problem. And when you're struggling, or when your loved ones are struggling, it's natural to want to stay close to home. Schedule and flexibility. It's back. We just talked about this. Too many meetings. I hear it from people all the time. Well, I'd get on the train to go to the office and I would gladly spend time with other people. But if I'm going to spend 6 hours staring at my laptop, because today's video products are designed for individual use, then why am I going to all this trouble? Plus, I'm losing the productive time that I'm now giving over to the commute. So I will just say personally, if I think about our own hybrid workplace strategies at MillerKnoll, we emphasized schedule flexibility, meaning when I go into the office, I book those days well in advance to not have meetings. I spend it quality time hanging out with others. I think it's a very different scenario when you're asking people to spend time together, but you're giving them control over their schedule, because we know 94% of people want it. Caregiving responsibilities, childcare, pet care. Look at the demographic shifts across the world where people like my age in their late 40s or early 50s are switching from taking care of kids to taking care of parents. And there's a whole lot of parents just given the baby boom. And so, design of office doesn't suit my preferences was on the list. it was quite a bit down the list. Sometimes I get calls from our customers, head of corporate real estate saying, hey, CEO is asking me to get everybody in the office. Boy, it's a tough ask when so many of these things are lifestyle related, so many of these things are work process related, yet office occupancy rates are going up. They're going up slowly. They're not, it isn't like, okay, next Tuesday is our big RTO day. It's, if you look at the data from Castle Systems or others, it's a small incremental tick as people get through a lot of these things. And we believe one of the best things that a facilities and real estate team can do, because so many of these things might be out of their control, is to step back, ask the question, what is the value of our workplace long term? How do we engage our people and communicate that with our people so that these shorter term concerns aren't necessarily creating a sense of paralysis, but instead that value prop of the office and of the workplace more broadly comes through loud and clear to employees, to management, and beyond. So that's the state of things. Joseph, I'll turn it over to you to describe what that might look like.
For sure. So Ryan just shared a broad range of data that really points to one key thing, that people want, need, expect flexibility. And within any flexible approach to workplace, it's really important to create places that matter to your people. So Ryan just mentioned a lot of us have been getting calls from folks saying, hey, we got to get everybody back in the office. Well, if that place doesn't matter to them, if it's not delivering value, it's going to be very difficult to get them to show up. And there's a really important thing to acknowledge here when we talk about places that matter. We do not determine the value of a place unless we are a user of that place. So only the people who use it are the ones that can really define what's valuable. So to help places deliver on their potential, we've synthesized the research and expertise from Herman Miller, Knoll, our broader collective of brands, into 4 place design principles. And not only do these principles draw upon the insight we've gained over decades, looking at the relationship between people and their place, but they also guide our exploration now and into the future. So they serve as a set of hypotheses to be tested over time. As the world changes around us and we continue to test this thinking, we gain new understanding and knowledge and new tools to help create places that matter. You can also use these 4 principles within your own organizations as a way to structure engagement with your people and form plans to build new experiences for the places that you create as an organization. So as I move through this next series of slides, I want you to keep a question in the back of your mind. Really think about, when it comes to work within your organization, what matters most to your people? What's going to provide the most valuable support to them? So now I'm going to go through and I'm going to introduce each of the 4 principles, and I'll share a specific insight about each in terms of how they connect to place design. Principle 1 is places that matter start with people. How and even why we design places today is different than it was 10, 5, or even 2 years ago. Yet this fundamental principle remains true. Places that matter start with people. Understanding how people experience the world is a prerequisite for creating places that matter. And that's because everything valuable about a place, its beauty, its function, its feeling, is conferred by the people in it. And just because human perspective is subjective, that doesn't mean it can't be explained or understood and recognized as a source of meaning. So a key insight here is that people show up simultaneously as individuals, members of groups, and representatives of larger communities. And as they move throughout their day, different experiences at the individual, group, and community level will take precedent depending on what needs to be done. So those variable roles that people fill will have an impact on what they value most in a place, whether that's being able to gracefully host others that haven't ever met each other before, or facilitating dialogue amongst a working group, or just trying to effectively tune out distractions on your own as an individual. So when you think about all of the different ways that people show up within your organization, what level of social experience do you think needs the most support, the most attention right now? Is it at that community, group, or team, or individual level? The second principle is places that matter strengthen community. Place is more valuable when it facilitates the relationships that help us generate value for our families, our organizations, and the communities in which we live and work. That's really how a place can strengthen community. Our activities connect us to one another, both directly and indirectly. And because place has an inherent ability to support or inhibit what we do within it, we can shape places to strengthen connection by facilitating the activities that bring people together, whether that's bringing them together physically, emotionally, purposefully, or otherwise. So trying to anticipate all of the things that people will do can be daunting, if not impossible. However, we can plan for activity based on the general experience of interactions between people and their work. And there are two broad types of experiences sought by individuals, groups, and communities. One is aimed at producing some sort of tangible outcome or specific result, while the other prioritizes open exchange, reflection upon ideas and information, and feelings. So the first type of experience really tends to rely on task-oriented postures and environments that are fine-tuned for performance, while the second prioritizes more relaxed postures and emotionally evocative spaces. I'm going to share some visuals here in just a few moments that show a side by side of these two different types of broad buckets of activity. So you'll get a sense of what that looks like in translation in the built environment. But at this moment, think again to your own organization. When you think about the things that people need to do, the things that need to be done to move the organization forward, which of those two worlds, the really like locking down and getting something done, producing that tangible outcome, or more of that open-ended exchange, that socialization, which one needs the most attention within your organization at this moment? The third principle is places that matter feel inclusive and personal. Place is a reflection of people, both the fundamental things that make us all human and the unique things that make all of us, well, unique. So it's really important to look at both sides of those to create places that feel inclusive and personal in order to ensure that they matter to folks within your organization. The expression of a place should be based upon the unique cultures, communities, and individuals for whom it was designed. So rather than expecting people to conform to uniform typologies of place, places that matter express what is both authentic and aspirational for people. And they consider the widest range of human ability and experience through inclusive design. So while delivering an equitable and with the intent of delivering an equitable experience for everyone. So generally speaking, we can see that communities need to socialize, groups need to collaborate, and individuals need to focus. But the best way to support that will vary from person to person, or team to team, or company to company. And a great way to meet those diverse needs is to include a purposeful variety of spaces informed by the people to meet that broad spectrum of need. So again, thinking of your own organization and you think of the specific ways that people want to come together, what starts to come to mind? Are there certain groups that come together in different ways, a way that might be completely different from another team? Are there certain individuals that have different expectations around what focus and productivity looks like? Think of that variety as you start looking at your current environment or an environment that you might want to create. The fourth principle is places that matter get better over time. The value we derive from a place fluctuates based on a range of factors, from our emotional connection to it, to its ability to adapt to new uses. Place is never static, but places that matter get better over time. And place is constantly evolving. And so whether that evolution is to the benefit or detriment of the people who use it requires deliberate action. And when we create places that matter, we invest time, thought, energy, and emotion, as well as capital into their improvement, granting them the resilience to adapt to new people and new patterns of use. So a place's ability to improve is largely determined by intentional and strategic investment in its creation. And here, investment doesn't necessarily mean spending a lot of money on new furniture. It can mean dedicating appropriate time to consider what's most important. So those questions that I've been posing, really doing some deep introspection around what's most valuable. It can mean putting in plan a place for experimentation to test new approaches, measure what's working, and make adjustments for the things that aren't. Or simply just making sure that you're right sizing the monetary spend for the challenge at hand. This principle also has kind of a double meaning in that places can get better over time through constant adaptation and change, but they can also get better over time by staying the same through permanence. So getting better with age. And this is another really important decision point for organizations. So when you look at how a place will change over time, where's the foundation and where's the flex? Where are the aspects that you really want to stay the same so that you're allowing for a transition of a bit of organizational memory or some organizational history that can be evident to other folks as they move through the space, or constantly adapting. If everything is flexible, then you end up with a situation of chaos. So it's important to decide what's going to stay the same and what's going to be in constant flux. So from that more kind of theoretical approach with those four principles, we can look forward to new ways of working and ways to create better experiences for people, whether they're in the office, at home, or in other locations. When we looked at the experiences that went under-supported while people were working from home, we reimagined the workplace as an on-demand destination for employees who are seeking out specific experiences that are difficult to replicate at home or elsewhere. And I would say that previously, a lot of the best workplaces were designed with an activity-based approach, and that's still an excellent way to plan. But we're starting to see a subtle shift with increased focus on the value of relationships and social experiences within the work process. So with that evolution in mind, we developed a new typology of spaces to streamline the process of identifying desired experiences and to help visualize options for real support. The typology builds on some of the insights we've just discussed, and the space types are grouped at a primary level by the social experience to be supported. So are you really looking at that individual, group, or community level of experience? And they're secondarily organized by the nature of interaction that people are seeking. So whether it's that open-ended exchange or that more kind of what we traditionally think of as a productive or outcome-oriented exchange. So when we look at these spaces, communities are either socializing or assembling to get things done. Groups are either meeting to share information or collaborating to develop new ideas and push work forward. And individuals are either stepping away from their work, focusing on individual well-being and restoration, or really digging in and trying to find moments of focus. When we look at these visually and how they show up in the environment, if you received an invitation and the invitation had a very specific agenda on something that you were expected to produce with a community of other folks, representatives from a broad range of teams, I bet you can guess which environment you would be showing up to, versus if you received an invitation that was really more about socializing, meeting new members of the team that hadn't been around previously. So our brain reads the environment very intuitively around what sort of interaction is expected, and we can create places that are more in alignment with what people are seeking out to do. These visuals are, of course, just thought starter examples. They are just one manifestation of hundreds, if not thousands, of manifestations that these functions can take. And these can vary in size, level of enclosure, degree of digital technology integration. But what we're really trying to do here is describe the general functionality to be supported at this community level, more towards socialization or assembling for productivity. At the group level, that same dynamic occurs of the two sides. So we've got the group meeting space on the left, which is really for exchanging and reflecting upon ideas, and the group collaboration space on the right, which is really more targeted towards producing some sort of targeted outcome. So there's been a significant amount of change in both of these environments over the last couple of years. So the space on the left more often than not would probably look like a large rectangular table in the middle of the room with a bunch of chairs sitting around it. And now we see that table essentially being broken apart. Each individual gets their own surface for their device, and this is giving them a lot of flexibility to experiment with new virtual communication tools, connecting with distributed teammates, and it's also a very low risk investment for organizations. As we're moving through this period of organizations finding new ways to interact and stay connected with each other, we need this flexible support to figure out what works best from team to team. So when we talk about creating experiments within your place or building a pilot project around that, this type of environment is really low-hanging fruit. On the right-hand side, group collaboration, this is another place where we've seen significant shifts. I would say that previously, most group collaboration spaces or team neighborhoods were outfit with multi-pack workstations. So you may have an 8-pack of workstations grouped together. There's a bit of a disconnect there in that those environments were simultaneously viewed as spaces for individual heads down work, but also group collaborative space. The problem with thinking of them as an individual space is that if you're sitting at an 8-pack, you're physically attached to 7 other people. The brain reads that as a group environment. So what that tells us is that we're not really serving the individual or the group interaction very well with that type of configuration. So we're seeing some more, I would say, progressive environments like the one that you see on the right, these team-based neighborhoods that have spaces for individuals to pull away, find brief moments of focus. But really the intent here is that group collaborative dynamic. When we look at the individual level, what we can see here is, again, that same dynamic, that reflection space on the left and the productive space on the right. So this individual restoration space that's visualized on the left is really not intended to be a place where you would sit with your laptop and engage in work. It's a place to step away. So maybe you just had a really intense phone call and you need a moment to just take a breath, recenter, refocus, or you want to collect your thoughts for something that's coming up later in the afternoon. It's intended to provide a moment to step away and have a quick moment of respite. As Ryan was sharing earlier, that fear of negative impact to personal well-being as being a barrier for people coming into the office, providing a greater variety of spaces for individual well-being can help mitigate that. On the right, this is a new type of individual focus space where we would describe people being alone together. And the inspiration for this really comes from academia. And so when I was mentioning that 8-pack earlier, that 8-pack of workstations is not really being a great spot to do deep individual focus work, something like this might be a better fit. So there would be behavioral expectations around this, that this is not a space for talking, this is a space for quiet, productive work. And there's a broad range of different types of places within this to do that, whether you're looking for something that has more visual separation from others, sitting side by side at that library table environment, kind of in the back, or if you want something that's more lounge oriented to engage in some deep reading, that's available there as well. There is, of course, another really important setting that you won't find in any office, and that's because it's back at home. This is unquestionably part of the mix, part of the broader ecosystem. And this is something that organizations are really starting to realize is part of their purview and will be part of their purview going forward in places where it makes sense and where it's feasible to look at ways to create better ergonomic support for folks while they are working outside of the office.
I'm going to jump in and just say, if it isn't obvious, what Joseph just walked through is really a template. I mean, you can take a look either at a new project or your existing portfolio of real estate and begin to ask the questions, okay, at a community level, are we supporting informal socialization? Are we supporting assembly? For groups, are we effectively supporting their meetings, but are we supporting, less structured collaborative processes? And it ties directly back with the data that I shared earlier from Future Forum, the reasons why people might not choose to go into the office related to well-being or other facets. Not that it'll solve every RTO issue, but clearly there's a direct line between those things that people are seeking from the workspace and the way that those space types in the office and at home can address them. Sorry, Joseph, I interrupted.
No, I was just transitioning to the next steps.
Great. Well, I'll jump in there, and then I also know we want to try to leave a little bit of time for Q&A. If your organization is happy as a clam with your current workspace, then that's awesome. If you're in the process of getting towards a new project, that's great. We're happy to come alongside you and work through some of those things. But in particular, if your organization is in this kind of liminal space where it's like, boy, we've got a lot of space, we don't have a ton of capital, we got to figure out what the right path is. Here's what we would recommend, and our teams can help support this. The first really relates to engaging with employees. And I just want to acknowledge that as I talk with our customers and potential customers about this, some are deeply involved with their user groups. Many, though, are hesitant. And what I'm not recommending here, what we're not recommending here is going around and saying to all your employees, what do you want out of your workspace? Because creating that level of expectation would not be healthy or anything that you could probably deliver upon. But what you can do, if I reference back to the analogy I used earlier, almost like those in facilities, corporate real estate, interior design are creating and managing a product, is to just understand these users better. Surveys are helpful. Being in research, I'll just tell you, there's limits to surveys. And when you get into really complex situations, focus groups, other ethnographic means of understanding people are really useful. So one simple thing would be focus groups. Could be done via Zoom, could be done in person. Just get together with teams on a regular basis, weekly, a couple times a month, and just begin to ask questions. Tell us about your work. How you doing? How's the team functioning? What's different about your work today than it was a few years ago? How are you using the space? How's working from home going for each of you? Based on your own individual needs, unique needs, what do you struggle with? You're going to find that as you engage in creating a workplace with employees, not just for employees, that the range of human condition and challenges people face are even broader than we might really initially anticipated. That process broadly is known as inclusive design. Joseph and I and one of our colleagues who comes from a healthcare background, Jolene, just authored a peer-reviewed white paper in Europe this summer that really goes deep into inclusive design. But it begins with this idea that the more you can understand the people and their needs and their evolving nature of work, the more it mitigates your risk in spending capital to go build stuff out. Second step, got to find a way of sharing that feedback. I mean, it's important to internalize it, but whether it's simple summaries or whether it's group conversations, like getting that feedback together and then saying, okay, where's the biggest bang for our buck? And if you're an organization that doesn't have a lot of capital, the conversation we'll have with you is how can you spend the least to improve your workplace the most to help those people? And try to hone in on those sort of either principles that we discussed that it feels like, well, you're doing great in some, falling short and on the other. You know, maybe the spaces don't get better over time. Maybe there's a degree of post-occupancy agility that's needed. Or maybe you're doing awesome with group collaboration. But boy, when it comes to like stitching together those weak ties in the broader community, there's just no good place to do it. Whatever it is, like we want to make sure that instead of kind of carte blanche, just copy and paste sort of design strategies, that whatever you do is going to be based on the feedback you get. Finally, experiment, pilot, prototype a little bit before spending a bunch of capital. Now, I know for a lot of people, piloting means like investing in 6,000 square feet or a couple thousand square meters of space. It doesn't have to. It can be a lot of things. It can be showing renderings of how to convert traditional meeting rooms to project spaces to groups of users and just saying, well, how do you react to this? Tell us about whether or not you feel like this would suit some of your work processes. Basically, the goal is to further mitigate risk, further create engagement, so that when it comes time to make those investments, you're going to get the greatest return possible on those investments for the people. Because we should just agree that in this world of work, where the office in particular is an on-demand location and where homes are not doing a great job of serving the physical and other work needs of people, that if these spaces aren't working for the people, then they're simply not working. All right. Do we have anything else, Joseph? Or is that where we decided to cut the deck?
That's where we cut the deck,
Okay.
but I think we can start working our way back through some of the questions that showed up in chat. And there, Emily posted the number of times that I've heard this Henry Ford quote recently is a little nuts. So
Which
those,
one is that?
hold on,
Oh,
my
better horses. Yes, yes, yes,
yes, my
yes.
interface just completely
Yeah, I
changed
mean,
and I
it's
lost.
true. Like, I am really empathetic to those customers that I've talked to that have been like, well, we did a survey and we asked people what they wanted, and now they want exactly what they had, but bigger and with nicer surface materials. And so, yeah, that's a dangerous point of entry. But it shouldn't
It,
prevent us from really getting to know them and their needs. I'll also just say kudos to Mark and the Insight team who have on these webinars highlighted lots of different facets of inclusive design. Even internally, recently we had an additional conversation about women of menopausal age, a topic that's been growing in the UK. Their needs, because it's estimated that almost 10% of women of menopausal age are leaving the workforce due to issues that they struggle talking with. The workplace can play a role. It's not going to solve everything, but it can play a role in making people's experience better for dozens of different groups that may have unique needs. I did see a question about the peer-reviewed white paper that Joseph, Jolene, and I worked on. That was published by the Commercial Real Estate Journal. Maybe Mark, you could include a link to that, or else we can always share the PDF if you want to drop
um,
one of us a note.
while I've got the image that Paul painted for us of going to work on a horse and working online, I did want to touch more on this notion of engaging your people. This is so critically important, and the really key thing to acknowledge here is it doesn't have to be an enormous effort. So I think a lot of times there's a tendency when organizations finally decide to do this that they want to ask people 50 questions. That's a pretty risky proposition unless you're in a position to act on all 50 of those questions. If you only have the wherewithal, if you only have the people, the budget, the schedule, to really respond to 3 questions, then only ask 3 questions and then come back when you're ready to act on more. The most important thing there is to establish dialogue and build trust and have people feel a sense of ownership in the places that they are helping to create. So this is a shift in thinking from designing for people to designing with people. And it's better to start small and build over time than to try to do it all at once. So if I asked people what they wanted, and they would have said a faster horse, it's also important to frame the question appropriately. What do you need to be successful in your job? Refocusing the conversation on the origin point of the relationship, that moment when the organization said, we have an open position, and someone out there raised their hand and said, I can do that better than anyone else, hire me. Remind them of that moment and say, what do you need to continue to deliver at that level? The other things are important, but the other personal wants and desires, but acknowledge those, say we're going to put them off to the side. We're going to handle the critical things first, and then we'll get to the other parts and pieces. That's something that is very easy to overlook, but there are ways to reduce the perceived risk in asking that question if you really focus on what is going to be successful in the organization.
It
Um,
makes me happy, all this chatting. That's what we
um,
want to do. We want to provoke more dialogue.
Chloe asked a question on how some of the settings that I showed might work where real estate is at a premium and space needs to flex to support a higher ratio of employees on the floor plate. That's a great question. I'm wondering if, forgive me as I kind of navigate through some of this wonkiness because I want to pull up. Oops. Are you seeing the screen again?
Yep.
I want to navigate back to some of these visuals. So if you look at an environment like this on the right, these types of screen elements those are completely mobile. Seeing more things like this show up into the environment. So if you look at this one in particular, and I look forward to that same piece is showing up here in this type of environment. And I'm not sure if we've got it in others, but looking at things that can provide mobile space division that is sub-architectural is really key. Here's another kind of example, making sure that you're focusing more on loose items that can be configured and reconfigured in different ways and designing some of that flex in up front so that you have options for an environment to serve one purpose at some point in time, but then another in a different point in time. That is one of the really key things there, making sure that when you're putting a plan in place, you have options to go in one direction or another.
I think I'm going to take Anthony's question around what
Yeah.
sort of role could play activity among coworkers have in today's office workspace. Is it an effective way to bring people together and foster more weak ties in a distributed environment? I certainly think it can be. I'm passionate about this one myself. I mean, finding ways of having entertainment, amusement, play, whatever, can help with stress. It can help with camaraderie. For many of us, it's easier to get to know someone when you're doing something together, and that's one of the benefits of like being involved in some sort of like fun activity. I think the challenge is it has to be culturally like appropriate, in the sense that if you set up a gaming room as an example, right? Like our Herman Miller brand entered into the gaming workplace in 2020. There's a lot of people that de-stress using an Xbox or a Switch or a PlayStation. I don't know that you could set up a gaming room in every office and have leadership and everybody else feel like it fit. In that case, it might need to be something much more subtle. But I do think finding ways of helping people to connect in that way is really beneficial. I don't personally subscribe to the idea that we can lure people back to work. That's not a term you'll hear us using typically, but I do think anytime there's an important change in the workplace, it needs to be communicated. And I think communicating the diversification of these spaces to support more activities, including some informal play and socialization, is a powerful message.
Katie was asking a question. I I can empathize with you so much, saying that she was from my past working career, saying that she was in a dated office environment where she feels like she's practically tucked into a box, and the directors of the company think this is the best possible way for staff to work. How do we change their minds when they're not open to change? Um, what I was saying earlier around reconnecting the conversation to the work to be done is so critical. So I would encourage you to think about what helps you to be successful. When you know you've done really great work, what helped you get there? I would dare say it wasn't being tucked in a box. You know, if it's getting inspiration from moving throughout an environment, different sensory experiences, cultivating different states of mind, spend time trying to find ways to articulate how your success is best supported. Start there rather than saying this doesn't work. So go into the conversation saying, I've been thinking about when I do really great work, this is how I get there, and this is what support looks like. Frame the conversation in the positive before going to what's in front of me is not meeting the need is somewhere where I've seen some progress. And the changing of minds in this case can be a pretty slow process. And that's where this engaging people in dialogue, what you're really doing is building a data set over time. And so you start small, but over a very small window of time, you will very soon have a body of data that becomes very difficult to refute.
I'll just add that sometimes I hear people talking about that they're feeling like the built environment takes so long to change. I'm still convinced that managerial mindsets take longer. So like there's a lot that can be done to improve an environment, but boy, the origins of offices in the late 1800s, I'm not going to get too much on my tangent here, was built to supervise work and to co-locate what were called bosses with people that need to be supervised. They wore starch white shirts. It's where white collar work comes from. There's still a feeling like put the people in their containers, make sure they're doing their work is a prevalent mindset. I don't know if that's true at your organization. In some cases, that's going to take more than a PowerPoint.
Katrina asked a question that I'm really fascinated in. So she was saying, how do you make space personal in an agile environment where there's desk sharing, for example? This is where I think we need to shift our perspective around what personalization in workspace actually means. I think typically, organizations or people were so hard stretched to find a representation of identity in an environment that it became so physically tied to the desk. This is where your photos of your family, your pets, your kind of objects that were representative of your personality lived physically. And I think that we would all, well, I would hope, agree that a desk is a pretty poor proxy for identity. So when we look at identity as expressed through the way we move throughout the world, the way the decisions that we make around where we choose to locate ourselves, if we have an environment that has a broad array of different types of spaces, there's like a quiet area, there's a more boisterous and lively area, there are places in between, there are places where the nerds go to sit and read and where the socialites go to socialize. That there are ways to express identity at more of a community scale in terms of how we get things done. And I think that that's a really fascinating to think about, where you could find other like-minded folks that think about solving problems in similar ways, or decompress from situations in similar ways. So how can we start thinking about different ways to express identity rather than through effectively putting up a sign? And I think if you were to visualize a recent Zoom or Teams call with your broader team, where you have the little window and you can kind of see into everyone's world a little bit, what might that look like in an office environment where you could start to get a sense of that identity in a completely different way, aside from looking at a bunch of uniform desks with different family photos across them?
I will just add team identity and the expression of team identity, and maybe even more importantly, the team's work is one of the most interesting opportunities for offices to get better. I think we're at time. I mean, you and I could keep going on this for ages. These are great questions. There's a question there about 4-day work week. A few others. Happy to engage and follow up, Mark, if there's a way to do so. Otherwise, we can always just look to our next month, right?
Yeah, and just to let you know, in the follow-up email, I will include Ryan and Joseph's email as well, so that you can email them personally. There will be links to quite a few of the things that we've discussed. We should also add the link to the podcast. So thank you everyone for joining us. I've also put a link in the chat to our upcoming webinars. As you leave today, you will be taken to a SurveyMonkey survey, which just asks you to give us a little bit of feedback. Ryan and Joseph, thank you for making my life really easy, because I just sit and watch. That was really good. Thank you very much for a fantastic presentation. And thank you everyone for joining us. And you get some graphic applause and then the usual thanks in the chat box. So I'll give you the very, very quiet applause. Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us.
Thanks everyone.
Everyone.
Appreciate your investment of time.
Thank you.